This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it is time for the Intentionality Gurus with Candace Pollock. And today's message is, or subject is, and we're staying on course with the Mind Body series, Stress's Silver Lining. And I have to tell you, Candace, when I got this morning, my first thought was, there just cannot be a silver lining. And then I started Googling things, and it's like, this is going to be interesting because it can be.
Well, and it's necessary if we're going to cope. So the point is for us to be able to toggle our mindset from one perspective to another is going to be, really important in terms of how well we cope with stressors, and experience them in the detrimental ways versus, what we can learn from them. So you ready?
I'm ready. Let's go.
Alrighty. So what went in your, mini search? What stood out for you?
Well, first, like I said, when I read it, it's like, how can stress have a silver lining? And then some of the things I was reading, it was like, you learn from those things that are, and I call them, they're hijacking me and stressing me out. And so it made me realize that I'm already in this phase of getting hijacked and then pulling myself back and going, wait a second, do I have to go there? Or why am I going there? Or can I go a different direction? And I didn't used to be like that. I mean, I grew up, if something hijacked me, I stayed there. I didn't know how to get out.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of like when we have a placid lake surface, for instance, early in the morning, and then some boats go by and maybe a breeze picks up on some of the wave action the boat has created. And then that sloshes into other waves that other boats or just people using the water might create. And in time, the water can get really choppy because that process just continues to bang up against other forces. And I think you said it perfectly that you in the way that we tend to talk about it. First, we notice, you didn't say these words, but first, you checked it out and you noticed that we live it every day on some level. Some of it we serve, some of it we don't. And to the extent that we can start turning some of the stuff we don't surf into stuff we can surf, we're going to be better in the long run. Now, I know I use surf a lot. So what did you take from that really convoluted sentence or two?
Well, it's interesting because this whole thing reminds me of a couple of weeks ago when I was in Texas. Every night before I go to sleep, I would take my rings off and I'd put them on the kitchen counter. Same place next to my medication, never had a problem. The last morning, I'm, cleaning up and getting dressed and packing, and I go to put my rings on. They're not there. And I'm scouring my son's apartment and I'm not thinking. All I'm doing is worrying about where are they? Where are they? Where are they? And I call him at work, and I almost blame him for moving them. And then I call my husband, and I'm crying that, I lost my rings. And I got into this mode, but all of a sudden I pulled myself back and realized if they're not there, they're probably gone. I just have to accept the process. And in doing that, I felt like I was in slow motion, but I was looking, but not looking as frantically. And what I ended up doing outside of his door, they placed their garbage there the night before, and it's supposed to be picked up at night. I walked out to the garbage, brought it into the house, dumped it into the sink, and in a paper towel were my rings.
Oh my Lord. What a
Yeah.
stroke of luck.
Yeah. I mean, it was but I went back into that stress mode again. And I started pulling myself back. Well, you got them. What did you learn from this? And now when I take my rings off, I put them in a special little container so that they're always in the container. They're not going to be amongst other things. So yeah, I learned from it, but I didn't realize it back then.
Yeah, perfect. All right. So then going forward, now you have kind of built in an incentive, some learning, some experience that taught you, I have to do X in order to, avoid that kind of episode.
Exactly.
All right. So in terms of using stress as an experience, we talked about it in the first episode in terms of not all stress is bad. And, we stress all the time when we go to the gym, not emotional stress, but well, maybe that too, but not traditionally emotional stress. We're using weights or machinery to give us some resistance, some obstacle to what we are doing. And then we overcome it, but then we're rewarded with muscles for the most part.
Yep.
All of these things are an approximation, a generalization, depending on how we go to the gym. I certainly had my share of friends who, wanted like a accountability buddy, and then they end up just talking and not ever actually working out.
Right.
But so that's not going to build muscles. But in this context, this analogy, we can be looking at these situations as a success in a way that we can replicate and reproduce going forward, so that it's building certain habits incrementally that will serve us. The other part is you somehow were able to hijack the hijack. Does that sound accurate? Yep. You were able to abort it. So what made that happen?
Part of it was, talking to my husband when he said, I know you're upset. I know this is not what you want to be happening. He said, but somehow we'll take care of it. And I knew it wasn't really what I wanted, but I knew that if I continued, feeling that anxious and stressed out, number one, it was going to be very hard for me to get on the airplane to come home. And it was just like, okay, you're right. Things happen. And I think that's what slowed me down. If I hadn't had something, he actually like distracted the hijacker in me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so what stands out for me in that is it's the classic situation of, we get caught up in the emotion. And remember from the last episode, we talked about how our body actually predicts our emotion.
Yep.
Because, it's helping trigger it. And so we have that little hair trigger amygdala going on in our brain that is constantly searching the horizon for friend, foe, danger, safety. In relative terms, it's not all safe, it's not all danger, but it's ebbing and flowing, and it's trying to do what it's designed to do, which is to keep us safe and help us survive and pass on our genes and blah 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 blah. And so in this context, the training is to notice that happening. That gives us the fork in the road where we have a choice. That also gets a different part of the brain involved. So the amygdala isn't still, like a little 10-year-old. I think I've shared a phrase that in some movie I saw, and it was about some people who had I guess, addictions, not just drinking, but other addictions as well. And the guy, the sponsor of the person who was going through the 12-step program said, emotions are kind of like children. You don't want them driving in the car, but you don't want to throw them in the trunk either.
Yeah.
And so, here we are caught up in our emotions. We don't want them driving the car, but we don't want to stuff them, but we can just notice them. I'm upset, and what am I saying to myself? The da 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 da. Well, the science shows that if we do that, then we'll break that hijack hook. But the other side of it, the silver lining, is incrementally we can be building more resilience, which is known as agency in psychological terms, but in layman's terms, it's known as cope.
Yep.
So the next time you have an episode like that, so I had something very similar with my rings. I had my wedding ring, and I'm extra sentimental about it since my husband's passed, and they fit fine. But I was fooling around in the pond that I have in the backyard, and the water was a little cold, and when that happens, my fingers shrink. And I didn't notice until I got back in the house that my ring was gone. And oh my God, where is it? I'd been trying to retrace my steps and everything else. And long story short, I happened to be talking to my sister that night, and she said, well, did you check the gloves? Because I was wearing, garden gloves. And I had, but I didn't find it. And it goes on and on and on. Somebody said, well, if you think you dropped it in the pond, get a big magnet. And I did, like a large magnet from Amazon, and then pull it around on a rope on the bottom. And, this is not the cleanest pond in the world. And it finally arrived, and I was going to go do that. And then I put my gloves on, and in the finger of the ring finger of the left-hand glove was my ring at the tippy part. So I didn't feel it when I checked the gloves. You get it?
Oh, yep.
So now every time I go near anything where I might lose my rings, particularly if it's cold surfaces, because my hands just shrink, I put that ring on a different finger, or I never take them off because I've lost too many rings. So I'm a smart rat. I've learned from, but not the smartest. I'm getting smarter. So that I have learned from past experiences, but sometimes it takes me several lessons to learn from those experiences. So in the past, I haven't taken my rings off because I've lost them. That was the lesson I took from it. In this instance, I do extra things to make sure that even though I'm wearing them, they're not going to get lost. So that's a form of resilience.
And it's a good form of resilience, it's like, because that's going to help you in other areas.
Oh, exactly. It's a transferable skill. Yep.
I noticed yesterday, my husband and I, we were talking about something, and it took me back almost to my childhood. And I started feeling myself getting anxious. And he noticed it, and he said, "Are you all right?" And I just started crying. And he goes, "What did I say?" And I had to think about what he said and how it got me back there. But it stressed me out. I mean, I was anxious most of the day yesterday. He just knew that I was at this sensitive part, and I can't tell you what it was that I remembered. I just knew that there was something in the way he said something that it triggered a past. It made me cry, and I thought about it all day long. And then I finally thought to myself, why am I letting this happen? What can I do to change it? Because I couldn't figure it out anyways, and it was like, it can't be that important. It just can't be. And within an hour or so, I was absolutely fine. And he now was totally confused. I think he was anxious for me.
And that's not a bad thing for him to be.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
So the idea is if we don't have some obstacles in our life, we're not going to be building certain muscles, thinking muscles, and ability to serve some of our feelings. And I have a friend who coaches young adults who have, had a hard time leaving the nest. And it's hard on the parents, it's hard on the young adult. And in our coddled, generations, not everybody is, but many are not dealing with enough situations where they have to learn some of these skills and basically what we call executive skills in order to navigate life effectively.
Yep.
So in this context, resilience can be seen as not, an out of the ordinary thing, but something that we want to cultivate, because it means that we're building more cope. We can bounce back from things more easily. And not that we're denying any of those experiences. It's just that we have better ways to cope with it than the hand wringing and those kinds of things. So where else do you think this might show up in your life? Since you're the guinea pig.
Yeah, I'm the guinea pig. I just know that for the majority of my life, I've allowed myself to be, I'm going to call it overly emotional. I get triggered easily, but it's within the last couple of years that I've learned that, okay, I just got triggered. Okay, what can I do to change it? I'm not allowing myself to always stay in that, in that mode. It's like,
yeah, and you're reminding me of an episode in a office situation where we were a copier machine guy was demonstrating the new copier we were releasing, and there were several of us in the office, and we were separate offices but sharing space.
Yep.
And this is like so old technology now, but at the time it was groundbreaking. And he said, you can scan something into the machine and you don't have to copy it each time. You can just go into the dashboard and print it again. It'll stay there. You're allowed to store up to, X number of templates.
Yep.
Right. And one of the secretaries for one of the other attorneys grabbed her coworker's arm and said out loud, "Oh my God, they're going to get rid of our jobs." And she meant it. She meant it. It was not meant in jest. And I just remember standing there like I was watching some movie, like this woman is always like on the verge of jumping off the ledge. Everything is like, she must just stew in cortisol. And I always felt sorry for her. But it was such an external expression of probably what her mind was saying all the time. Oh, this is dangerous. This is dangerous. This is dangerous. And I don't mean that in a judgmental way. I mean it in terms of, so much of that is happening at a lower level in our brain. It's just the voice we're familiar with, right?
Yeah.
And so to be able to like take a moment, let the dust settle, so to speak, and then come at it from a different perspective. What they've shown is if we can cultivate this habit of just catching ourselves, basically naming it to tame it, oh, there I go again, right. Such and such, we will have more general life satisfaction levels.
I was very much like that woman, except I didn't verbalize it.
Well, not externally.
Yeah, I would hold it in. It would be like, right. And then, maybe I'd come home and, say something, my husband about it. But then I would go way off, the path, because now I'm spilling it out. And he would just sit there and listen to me. And then at the end, he'd go, "Really?" And be like, "Yeah, that was a bunch of garbage that just came out of me, wasn't it?" But hold it in until I could release it. And then I'd be like, oh, but I wasn't learning from it for a long time.
Yeah, and we don't learn this stuff to learn from it.
Yeah.
I wonder in the schools if we could have some kind of programs that would help kids understand those things, with gang activity. And obviously it's a much more complicated issue than, name it to tame it. But some of those skills in terms of it isn't, when we're in the hijack mode, our field of vision about what things could mean is going to be very narrow because we're in that flight, fight or flee status. We're operating on some primitive survival level. And, we have to allow a beat or two to go by in order to let the other parts of the brain kick in where they can be more logical, so long as we can recognize that, oh, okay, thank you, whatever stressor. I prefer not to have you, but thank you. I'll look for that little gift here. And so it sounds to me like you kind of changed your thoughts about some of the ways that you were thinking.
Absolutely. When both my son and my husband, started seeing it in me and saying things like, is it necessary for you to basically make yourself ill? I started hearing what they were saying, and it was like, how do I change this? And, for me, podcasting and blogging and journaling was my first step. Because when you hear your own voice, whether it's on paper or going back and listening to a podcast like this, it's like, wow, do I want to sound like this? Or, what can I do to better myself? And that's something that we don't teach people. Sadly, we teach people to be better than somebody else, but not better than themselves. And so if you're fighting that dream to be better than somebody else, most of the time you get defeated. You're not going to get there. But if you're better than yourself, then you're working at the right pace.
Yeah, and what occurs to me when you said that is we also have a societal thing. It's I have in the past called it the SUV mentality, like, me first, it's me. Yep. And but in the media and so on, particularly with as much of the, what do you call it, the celebrity kind of mentality that we all have, our moments of fame on Facebook or whatever. There's that, well, you got to take me the way I am. It's, all or nothing, rather than some kind of, can we work something out here? We each have to compromise a little.
Right.
And it's unfortunate because it's not conducive, let's say, to beneficial relationships. And I don't mean being a pleaser and bending over backwards, but, just being able to see some common areas and so on.
Absolutely. Well,
so in the conversation today, what do you think would be the most important thing for listeners to take away?
It's like, taking your pulse, when you start to feel these things, is this where I'm meant to go? Is this where I want to go? What can I do differently about it? Maybe you're happy being hijacked, maybe it takes you to the next step. But I think it's just, as we talk about so much, being aware, being mindful of how it's affecting you.
Yeah, and next time we'll explore the literal health impacts of stress and how we cope with it, because there is a direct cause and action now that the science is getting more sophisticated. So,
well, We will be back again next month. And in the meantime, enjoy whatever the weather is wherever you are. I'm not sure what's going to be happening in the Cleveland area today because I see black clouds out my window. So have a good day, everybody.
Thank
Bye.
you, Karen. Bye-bye.